Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a powerful climbing team for the Open Master League. Now this team took a trainer on a 21-4 climb up to Legend rank, and the team features Kiram White lead, Lunala and Zacian in the back. Now that trainer used Dragon Pulse on Kiram White instead of Ice Burn, but I ended up running the team with Ice Burn, and the good news is the team still worked amazingly well. Now these battles were done in the 3100s. It was very difficult to get matches, and I experienced some crazy matchmaking, including queuing the same trainer 4 times in one singular day. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. We pick up a very good lead in the first match, Kiram White into Zacian. Even though Zacian has a ton of super effective fast food pressure into Kiram White, Kiram can always outpace and threaten massive damage in return with Fusion Flare. My opponent no shields, I safe switch into Lunala, and my opponent's going to send out Zygarde. If they're switching Zygarde into Lunala, then they're guaranteed to be running Crunch. Crunch, even though will hit for double super effective onto Lunala, does not one-shot from this health range, so I will always be able to hang on and force my opponent to fire off Crunch number 2. If they don't throw back-to-back, I will be able to outpace and make the Shadow Ball. While Shadow Ball won't take the knockout here, it will put the Zygarde very low, and importantly, burn my switch timer to be able to pivot back into the Kiram and get the Crunch catch. I did want to save Lunala with a little bit of HP remaining. My opponent does get the Crunch debuff, and back in comes the Zacian. Zacian not going to opt to throw energy, instead going to look to try and go for a pretty massive farm down. Fusion Flare will get the shield. They exit with a ton of energy, but I can bring in Lunala and force them to fire off an entire Behemoth Blade. Behemoth Blade, massive overkill, knocking out Lunala, but at this point of the game, I'm trusting that Zacian will be able to take home the win. So Zacian hits the field, my opponent fires off the close combat, and they're going to pivot out to reveal their final Pokemon in the back is their own Lunala. Their Zacian and Zygarde are both very, very low, so if I can KO Lunala with even just a little bit of HP remaining on my Zacian, I feel like I should be in a pretty good spot. Even though the Shadow Ball is going to do the same amount of damage either way, it's always worth shielding the first to make my opponent throw again. Because by having to throw again, I'm taking one less Shadow Claw along the way. Behemoth Blade lands, it's a 1 HP survive, and unfortunately the Shadow Ball is guaranteed to connect. Shadow Ball lands, putting Zacian very low, and this is going to be very close. In comes the Zygarde, they switch into Zacian, they get sniped down. In comes the Zygarde, opponent sees the writing on the wall, and concedes the match. We move to game number 2, leading Kiram into Ho-Oh. This is a very favorable lead matchup. Ho-Oh is going to get outpaced here pretty severely, unless they end up doing what they do, which is just firing off the Brave Bird right away. This is going to get them an early shield advantage, but they're going to have to pivot out. They're going to pivot out, safe switching into Zacian, but I'm up so much energy on Kiram that I can really make life uncomfortable for them. Fusion Flare is going to be shielded, but I can just massively outpace here, makes Fusion Flare number 2, and I'm not switching out until I land this damage. Fusion Flare is going to connect, I'm going to farm up, trying for a close combat catch, but my opponent is just simply far too patient. The good news is, I should be able to get a full farm down here before they make the Behemoth Blade. They will be able to make a close combat, and the switch timer comes up. That's a very good play from my opponent. They're able to save the close combat for later and bring back in the Ho-Oh. But with this energy lead on Lunala, I'm going to be able to make it to back-to-back Shadow Balls, and now my opponent has to give me their final shield or lose that entire Sacred Fire. They end up no shielding, the Sacred Fire goes down the drain, and now they're going to have to try and sweep with their final Pokemon in the back, which is revealed to be Xerneas. Xerneas hits the field, I can send in the Zacian, and from here this game is over. Zacian has a very commanding matchup into Xerneas. Xerneas can get somewhat close to 2-shotting with back-to-back close combats, but the bad news for my opponent is that it doesn't quite pick up the 2 and KO. I anticipate my opponent to throw an alignment, so I actually go for the CMP tie, and winning that CMP tie is going to instantly end the game. I can now shield up. They're very heavily debuffed, so they can go for the combination play and snipe me down with the close combat, but in doing so, they've just set up my Kiram White to get farm. I can bring in the Kiram, get the farm down, back in comes the Xerneas. I probably could have knocked out with the Fusion Flare there, but let's guarantee the knockout. We can fire off the Ice Burn, KO the Xerneas, and that's going to be a win. We move to the next match, and what do you know, it's the same opponent from last game, back-to-back queues. This is going to be interesting. On paper, I should be favored here, but my opponent now knows my entire line, and that's going to allow them to make adjustments. So far, they play it the same way they did before, going for the Brave Bird, but there's the adjustment, as in comes Xerneas. This is an incredibly intelligent adjustment from my opponent, because they want the Zacian to knock out the Xerneas so they can get an insane amount of farm on Ho-Oh. Xerneas fires off the close combat. The good news for me is that close combat is not going to be enough to pick up the knockout here. It will, however, put me very, very low, so I don't think I can get the farm down. That's going to force me to immediately undertap the Behemoth Blade. Behemoth Blade is going to be securing the knockout onto Xerneas. Switch timer will be up momentarily. Back in comes Ho-Oh, and I can switch out, saving that low health Zacian, and snipe them down with Ice Burn. They end up no shielding, pivoting out, and they're going to reveal it is going to be that same Zacian in the back. But this is now a very different game. My opponent has correctly prioritized the Zacian as the Pokemon that they're going to need to win. I'm able to make back-to-back fusion flares, which is very good news for me, but unfortunately my opponent has 2 Protect Shields, so they can double shield the Zacian and farm down. If I could get a catch, that would be massive, but unfortunately I was going to switch after 3, and they throw after 2. Very nice prediction by my opponent. I shield up, but unfortunately my opponent will be able to make it to a second Behemoth Blade, and once again, they end up waiting the turn to ensure that I don't get the catch. Behemoth landing is very bad news for me, but I'm not out of it yet. If I can get the Shadow Claw down before they make the close combat, this is going to be a win. Shadow Ball lands. It looks like they're going to make the close combat. I go for the catch, but it's a simul switch. Lunala into Ho-Oh. I snipe them down, but Zacian has the close combat, wins charge attack priority. Oh my goodness, what an insane game from my opponent. So well played. They played the rematch perfectly. I just got to tip my hat to them. That was so well played. We move to the next match. We've got some crazy spice on the lead in the next match as I lead Kyurem White into Kartana. I overfarm slightly, catch the Sacred Sword onto Lunala, and just like that, now we've got a real game. My opponent's going to send in Reshiram. Even if they have the Crunch here, I believe I might be outside of range. Crunch lands, we get the 1 HP survive. Lunala is just an absolute beast, and that is so important as I'm able to make the Shadow Ball. This should set up a massive farm down now for the Kyurem. Kyurem gets to exit up a ton of energy, and if my opponent brings in that Kartana, they're going to get absolutely shredded by the Fusion Flares. They're waiting down the timer, they bring in Kartana, I double up, and they catch on Palkia. I've got to say, playing Master League in this ELO bracket was so incredibly fun. All of the games were just so well played by all of my opponents. I can fire off Ice Burn now to guarantee the shield. Shield does come up for my opponent, but I actually get the Ice Burn debuff. This means my opponent's defense has been debuffed. These Metal Claws are suddenly critting. They are doing so much damage. I fire off Behemoth. I don't want to lower my defense. My opponent has farmed up enough to the point where I'm not counting. I'm just going to respect the potential Fire Blast. No one should be running Fire Blast on Palkia, but I didn't want to lose on the spot in case they actually had it. Now they can start spamming on Aqua Tails, but with no fear of Fire Blast, I feel very comfortable just absorbing this energy. They're going to go for a third Aqua Tail. The moment I get the close combat, I'm going for it. Close combat does not get caught, and that is going to end the game. Because now I can just secure the knockout, and then look to pivot out into the Kyurem. Back in comes the Kartana. Kartana's going to have to double up here. Kartana is going to win charge attack priority over the Kyurem, but the good news for me is the Fusion Flare is locked and loaded. So Sacred Fire is going to be shielded. Sorry, not Sacred Fire, Sacred Sword. I stand corrected. Sacred Sword gets shielded. That'd be insane if Kartana got Sacred Fire. We KO with the Fusion Flare, and we get the win. Great lead in the next match, leading Kyurem White into Kyogre. My opponent safe switches into Zacian, and I'm going to stay in and fire off a Fusion Flare. Fusion Flare is going to be shielded. Unfortunately, this time, I'm not really able to get the advantage that I would have hoped, and I just decided to switch my Zacian into theirs. Even if they go for the Behemoth, it will not be enough to secure the knockout. They actually go for the close combat, and they fire off close combat number 2. This guarantees that they will be able to burn their switch clock and get Kyogre back on the field. Kyogre, unfortunately, is going to get the farm down. I'm not going to get the back-to-back close combats. I should have just thrown one Metal Claw in the close combat, because unfortunately the Waterfall takes the KO. So, honestly, some pretty sloppy gameplay for me so far in this game. This is my first game of the day, and you can definitely tell it. The battles are a little bit out of order, but if I want a chance, I have to go for the farm down. This is going to be close. We do get the farm down. They were right at the Avalanche, but they did not get it. I believe the DB KO'd right before they received the energy for that move. Ice Burn connects, nice damage onto the Xerneas. Xerneas is forced to throw an alignment, otherwise I could outpace and pressure away a shield. But I'm just going to be no-shielding here, because a Moonblast is obviously going to be doing a lot less damage than a move from Zacian. Now Zacian has to try and farm down, and there's just simply no way they're ever going to be able to do that. The Metal Claws, while it's decent fast move pressure, Lunala is just very bulky, so I can withstand that fast move pressure, fire off a Shadow Ball, take the knockout, and as Xerneas comes back in, Shadow Claw down with Lunala, and take the win. We move to the next match, leading Kyurem White into Eternatus, and this matchup is full of a ton of mind games. I can obviously catch at any moment. I can also go for baits. My opponent overfarms massively, and I decide to full send. I go for the Ice Burn, opponent calls the bait, and Eternatus has been KO'd. But unfortunately, it doesn't appear that I've instantly won the game, because in comes Lunala. And Lunala up energy is very scary for my backline. I built up the Ice Burn, bait with the Fusion Flare, they no-shield once again. They are clearly saving 2 shields for whatever they have in the back. That does worry me a little bit because there are definitely Pokemon that up energy and up a shield could definitely sweep me. I overfarm CMP tying Fusion Flare to the Shadow Ball. Fusion Flare is going to connect, and they reveal their final Pokemon in the back is Shadow Rhyperior. I bank energy for later, pivot into Lunala, but unfortunately, I'm a little bit worried that I might not end up winning this game. Rhyperior should full send the Rock Wrecker here. Rock Wrecker is an incredibly efficient attack, and because I ended up deferring a Mud Slap from the Kyurem onto Lunala, I'm not going to be able to make it to a second Shadow Ball, and falling just short of the Shadow Ball there is pretty catastrophic. I can now bring in the Zacian. Drill Run won't one-shot, but the Mud Slaps that land after are going to be a very big issue. I end up no-shielding, Drill Run connects, that's going to put me very low. Can we make the close combat? We cannot. My opponent fires off energy. I believe I'm at 1 HP here, so I can't put up the shield. Drill Run takes the knockout, in comes Kyurem, it's a simple KO, and somehow that game ends in a tie. We move to the next match, Kyurem White into Eternatus, and what do you know, we have queued the same trainer once again. This time, we actually both switch out a simultaneous switch, my Zacian into their Lunala. The Zacian-Lunala interaction is a very complex one. I'm going to end up no-shielding the Shadow Ball, and if my opponent knows the matchup well, which at above 3100 ELO they definitely should, they can also no-shield this and guaranteed always make it to the Shadow Ball. And look at the matchup knowledge, they know they can survive, they're trying to play for whatever advantage they can get. I know they have the Shadow Rhyperior in the back, so I'm very well aware of the fact that I have to be very, very careful. I cannot afford to give that Rhyperior an advantage. Back in comes Eternatus, I put up the shield. They did end up no-shielding last time. I decide, you know what, they might try and no-shield again. So I full send, going for the Ice Burn, but this time they put up the shield. Ice Burn does not get the debuff either, and I could be in quite a bit of trouble, because the Rhyperior is going to be up a shield in the end game. However, I should be able to overfarm enough that if they end up no-shielding, I can always make an Ice Burn into the Rhyperior, and then the combination of Ice Burn plus Shadow Ball can take the win. But they're going to put up the shield. The game comes down to this. Lunala has to win the zeros versus Shadow Rhyperior. But the good news for me is that I'm going to be up exactly 1 turn, and being up 1 turn should put me in a game-winning position for Lunala. So I farm up massively, fire off the Shadow Ball on 12. Rhyperior should barely live this on 1 HP, and they're only going to get 1 charge attack. This is going to be the Rock Wrecker, but Rock Wrecker should barely miss the knockout. We hang on with 1 HP remaining, exit with the Shadow Ball loaded, and that is as close as it can get. Shadow Ball KOs Eternatus, and we're able to get the win. We've already queued that trainer twice today. Let's make it a 3rd queue. This time it wasn't a different set, so it wasn't 3 times in a row, and this time we have a Kyurem White mirror. Now, my Kyurem White is 14 attack, meaning I'm always going to lose CMP in the mirror. So instead of playing to a losing CMP tie, I land a Fusion Flare and then go for an Ice Burn catch onto my Zacian. Thankfully, my opponent did not go for the bait, but a little bit of bad luck strikes as the Ice Burn does actually get the defense drop. I'm switch locked, my defense is debuffed, and what do you know? Right on cue, there's the Shadow Rhyperior. I'm going to throw the close combat right away. I'm hoping that the close combat debuff will ensure that I get knocked out here, but it does not, and my opponent's able to get 1 extra Mud Slap. They do exit, I believe, with 50 energy, and now I'm going to bring in the Kyurem. Kyurem is going to get knocked out here by a Drill Run, most likely. I can't quite outpace my opponent, so what I'm going to do is throw 3 and then CMP tie Fusion Flare to their Drill Run. Fusion Flare is not going to knock out, but what it is going to give me is the ability to get a 0-turn switch. If it's Lunala in the back, my opponent's going to have a 1-turn switch, I'm going to have a 0, and being up energy in the mirror is everything. And there it is going to be Lunala, but because I am up energy and up a turn, I should now be in a winning position. I can fire off Shadow Ball, they put up the shield, they kind of just have to commit to the fast move pressure, but I have just enough HP. I will not get knocked out by 1 Mud Slap. It's going to be very, very close, but I should be able to hang on. In comes Shadow Rhyperior, 2 Shadow Claws KO. My goodness, these games are insanely technical. We move to the next match and pick up a very rough lead, Kyurem White into Marshadow. Marshadow, I think, is very underrated right now and is also very, very strong into this team. They do have enough for the close combat. I put up the shield. They're going to full send, so we get the shield call right. But in comes Reshiram, and unfortunately, a bad scenario only gets worse. Reshiram will put up the shield as they go for the Ice Burn. Normally, Kyurem White can just straight up beat Reshiram, but Reshiram had shield advantage. I've already taken quite a bit of damage throughout the course of this game as well, so I'm in Fusion Flare range, and I think my best course of action is just to play out the 2s. I'm going to end up losing the 2s, but if I can get whatever damage that I can onto the Reshiram, that is going to be my best key to victory. My opponent doesn't want to risk me making a move. They're just going to fire off the Fusion Flare, and now I'm going to have to try and go for an incredibly aggressive farm down. I bring in Lunala. My opponent is going to make a move, and I really have to hope this is not Crunch. If it's Crunch, I'm probably getting one shot. Crunch lands. I almost get one shot. In comes Zacian, but the switch timer's up, and they're able to pivot into Marshadow. Marshadow outpaces by one singular turn. My opponent switching just at the perfect time. Close combat connects, and I am in absolutely dire straits. I overfarm enough so that maybe if they're weak to Zacian energy in the back, I will be able to salvage this game. Behemoth Blade lands, that's going to be the end of Marshadow. Whatever they bring in is guaranteed to be switch locked. They're waiting down the timer, but it will not save them in the back. It's going to be their own Kyurem White, and we're actually going to win this game. I cannot believe it. All looked lost, but Behemoth Blade one-shots the Kyurem. Back in comes the Reshiram. Reshiram gets Metal Claw down, and that is a good game. Hopping to the final match, we queue Coconut Mauled for a fourth time, and let's see what adjustments he's going to make. It's going to be the Kyurem White Mirror once again. I'm never going to be able to replicate the Iceburn catch because he's always going to go for the Fusion Flare bait now to cover for it. I decided to put up the shield. I overfarmed quite significantly, and I'm going to be firing off my own Fusion Flare. Fusion Flare is going to be no shielded, and I do have quite a bit of energy. In comes the Shadow Rhyperior, and this is going to be awkward. I overfarm, and I go for the bait. If I get the bait, and if I can live the next Mud Slap, I'm guaranteed to make the Iceburn. The Flare gets the shield, but I faint to the Mud Slap. That was like an exact HP knockout, and unfortunately, that probably seals my fate. My only chance back in would be a Rock Wrecker catch. I go for it, and we get the catch. Did he throw the Rock Wrecker, or is it the Drill Run? It's the Drill Run. He covered for that catch too. He was just way too prepared. He snipes down with Lunala, and unfortunately, we're down energy. There's a very healthy Rhyperior, and I will concede the match. I hope this video and these battles demonstrate why I have so much fun playing Master League towards the top of the leaderboard. Even though the queue times are absolutely horrendous, my goodness, the caliber of opponent is just absolutely unreal. I felt like every single game in this video, I was fighting for my life, having to try and make crazy reads, and sometimes when re-queuing players multiple times, trying to figure out the adjustments necessary. If you ended up winning the first time, what's your opponent going to try and adjust? How can you try and nullify their adjustment? It is an insane game of cat and mouse. Add to that the fact that all these players basically play technically flawlessly, and you just end up with some incredibly cerebral games, but it is just so much fun. The queue times are an absolute drag. I cannot lie. I believe I was averaging about an hour per set, but the games that I was playing were just so incredibly fun. With Open Great League always being available courtesy of the Competitors Cup, it makes getting queues in the other leagues, especially at high ELO, even more difficult. So it has definitely been difficult this season to play Ultra League and Master League because of the Competitor Cup always existing. So I am a little bit excited for next season when the Competitor Cup hopefully will no longer be a thing. So hopefully then, once people are not able to play Open Great League every week, then they can branch out into the other leagues, because the Open Master League and the Open Ultra League, I think, are very, very fun formats. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys always very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.